The 20th of February 1959, Canadian government cancels the Avro Canada CF-105 Arrow. Held the promise of Mach 2 speeds at altitudes exceeding 50,000 feet, and was intended to serve as the Royal Canadian Air Force's primary interceptor into the 1960s and beyond. A black day in the history of Canadian aviation industry. After World War II in Europe, Italy, France, Sweden and UK aviation industry working on jet fighters on very large scale to counter Russian threat and produced many successful fighters. Canada was a country who is working on fighter jet program along with US fighter jets license production. The Canadair Sabre was a jet fighter aircraft built by Canadair under license. A variant of the F-86 Sabre, it was produced until 1958 and used primarily by the Royal Canadian Air Force until replaced with the Canadair CF-104 in 1962. 10 other air forces also operated the aircraft. Canada aviation industry also working on indigenous fighter jet. The Avro Canada CF-100 Canuck was a Canadian twinjet interceptor fighter designed and produced by aircraft manufacturer Avro Canada. It has the distinction of being the only Canadian-designed fighter to enter mass production. The CF-100 principally served with the Royal Canadian Air Force and Canadian Armed Forces. It was also procured in small numbers by Belgium to equip the Belgian air component. Introduced during 1952 amid the Cold War, the CF-100 was typically deployed at both NATO bases in Europe and in North America as part of North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. In addition to the type's use by frontline squadrons, it was also supplied to operational training units and frequently used for other secondary duties, including aerial reconnaissance and electronic warfare roles. During the early 1950s, the Avro Canada CF-103, an advanced derivative of the CF-100 that adopted a swept wing and was capable of transonic speeds, was in development, but was terminated. Further development of these concepts ultimately led to the Avro Canada CF-105 Arrow. Canada was a very attractive market for USA defense industry. As a part of NATO, all members looking for US advance equipments, but if any member produce weapons indigenously, USA always interrupt their plans. Sweden and France suffers pressures to acquire US weapons. The same pressures also faced by other countries and Canada was one of them. Canadian government revoke her fighter jet industry due to USA pressures. The last amazing aviation success was cancelled due US pressure. The Avro Canada CF-105 Arrow was a delta-winged interceptor aircraft designed and built by Avro Canada. The CF-105 held the promise of Mach 2 speeds at altitudes exceeding 50,000 feet, 15,000 meters, and was intended to serve as the Royal Canadian Air Force's, RCAF, primary interceptor into the 1960s and beyond. This aircraft was a real success. In the days of Cold War, Canadian Air Force requested for Mach 2 interceptor to stop Russian high-speed, high-altitude fighter jets. The CF-105 Arrow fulfilled both requirements. US administration was clearly understand meaning of this aircraft success, which will be ousted US fighter jets from Canadian Air Force forever. Then Canadian government decided not to produce Avro Canada CF-105 Arrow and shut down all facilities at once. After this decision, immediately put 14,528 Avro employees, as well as nearly 15,000 other employees in the Avro supply chain of outside suppliers, out of work, and Canadian aviation industry closed in favor of US aviation doctrine. In 1961, the RCAF obtained 66 McDonnell CF-101 Voodoo aircraft, one of the American designs the RCAF originally rejected to serve in the role originally intended for the Avro Arrow. The controversy surrounding this acquisition, and Canada's acquiring nuclear weapons for the Voodoos and Beaumarks, eventually contributed to the collapse of the Diefenbaker government in 1963. Although nearly everything connected to the CF-105 and Orender Iroquois programs was destroyed, some were saved and are on display at the Canada Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa. The cockpit and nose gear of RL-206, the first Mk2 Arrow, and two outer panels of RL-203's wings, alongside an Iroquois engine. At the time of its cancellation, with specifications comparable to then current offerings from American and Soviet design bureaus, the Arrow was considered by one aviation industry observer to be one of the most advanced aircraft in the world.